Hi, this is Jennifer Cohn. I'm here today with Norma Lester, who is a former Shelby County election commissioner and current chair of the Shelby County Primary Democratic Primary Board. Hi, Norma. It's so nice to meet you in person, or in face-to-face anyway.
Yes, same here.
Thank you very much for joining me to talk about election security in Shelby County. So, as you know, I interviewed Benny Smith, Election Commissioner Smith, last week, and we were talking about his review of poll tapes in 2015. These are the precinct-based voting machine totals that come out on a long strip of paper on election night, and he compared those to the totals from the central tabulator and found that in 20 or so predominantly Black precincts, many of the votes weren't making it out into these central tabulator reported totals, whereas in the other precincts, they were. And this was a really alarming discovery. It was reported in Bloomberg. There was something similar that occurred in Georgia in 2018 with votes disappearing from Black precincts. And, you know, I just haven't felt like it has received the national attention that it deserved, because there really has never been any benign explanation certainly offered for this. And so I'm hoping to get more information, and I understand, well, first of all, I want to get a little of your background. I believe you were when did you start working in elections?
I started in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah,
And how did you start?
Well, I had been very active in the Democratic Party. I served as first, second vice chair, secretary, chaired of the biannual convention, chaired of the presidential primary convention. So I had been very active and very outspoken in the democratic process. And so when the positions became available, several of the legislators wanted me to serve in that capacity. So that's how I got involved in 2011.
And is this a position where you have to be nominated or appointed by someone?
Yeah, you have to be appointed by the legislative body. The Democrats appoint theirs, and the Republicans appoint there. And the appointments are every 2 years. Either you get reappointed or someone else gets appointed or whatever.
Okay. And were you, at the time you joined the board, were you concerned particularly about Shelby County's electronic voting system?
Well, not. I mean, I was a novice in terms of, and like most people, in terms of what all goes on in voting. The concern that was generally we had in Shelby County is that seemed like there was always problems. There was always problems on election night or something in the polls. But we didn't have any knowledge. We just couldn't figure out what was going on. So we really didn't know. And once I got on the commission and started learning more, being exposed to more, then that's when I became more concerned about what was happening.
And who was the election administrator when you were on the board?
Richard Holden was the administrator when I came on, and Richard did not have a good reputation among the voters, both Democrat and Republicans. I can say. So that was the problem. Is that
go ahead?
Go ahead. No, is that he just wasn't well liked by neither parties.
Was he appointed as well?
He was appointed, and actually he was appointed by the commissioners. And what happened when the Democrats had control of the commission for years, maybe 40 years, and I think it was in 2010 maybe, when the Republicans just kind of took over everything. And in the state of Tennessee, it's the majority party is the one who controls the election commission. And so Richard had previously served in the minority role on the election commission as a commissioner. It was 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats. But when the shift, then the Republicans removed the Democratic administrator, And ironically, he became a Democratic commissioner on the election commissioner, and Richard became the administrative election. So that was the switch after the takeover.
Okay, and so then just if I understand right, even though this is Shelby County itself is majority African American, majority Democratic voters, most likely, the commission itself is whoever leads the commission is determined by who has the majority in the state overall, and that's why the Republicans now have control.
Yeah,
It's surprising that was it surprising that the Republicans swept all the county races in 2010?
Yeah. That was an upset. It was very, very surprising. In fact, I think there was a lawsuit. Of course, I was not involved in the election commission at that time, but there was a lawsuit. Several of the people who were engaged in different campaigns as candidates, they filed a lawsuit to see what was going on, because it was just it was just surprising. It was just overwhelming, just hard to believe. So
and why was it so hard to believe?
well, because it's just that to take every seat, that had just not, to take every seat was just surprising when you're talking about you're in a primarily Democratic community. To not win any of the seats, it was an attention getter. People were just concerned as to how that could be.
And so that election was soon after Richard Holden became the election administrator, or was it before?
Yeah. That
after.
was,
okay.
Yeah. That was right after he became the administrator. Right after Republicans took over control.
Okay, and so Shelby County's voting system was purchased, electronic voting system was bought mostly in 2006 from Diebold Election Systems. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And in history, actually, it was selected by the Democrats. It was the Democrats who selected that system.
Right, and it's an unauditable system, right? In the sense that it doesn't involve hand-marked paper ballots that can be compared against the electronic total.
No, it doesn't.
And then at some point, ES&S, I know they acquired Diebold in 2010, and at some point, probably around then, they dissolved Diebold. The Department of Justice made them dissolve it in an antitrust suit, and then ES&S took over the Shelby County contract. Is that right?
Yes. I'm not really sure when they took over the contract, but they had the contract when I came on board in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were your first interactions with ES&S, or did you have any interactions personally with ES&S?
Well, like I said, I came on board as a novice, an advocate for the election integrity, and I made that perfectly clear. Although I was a Democrat, my role then, as I saw it, was just to maintain the integrity of the election process. So it wasn't a Democrat versus Republican issue for me. Mm-hmm. I was there to represent the voters, the constituents in Shelby County, regardless of what party they were. And I was naive enough to think that was the role of the entire election commission. So I didn't, like I said, I didn't come in with any preconceived notions or anything, just other than, because I'm a systems person by background, and I just wanted to, set up some systems and provide a mechanism where we could have good, clean elections, and to restore the trust of the community, because the community had no trust in the election commission. So, and I thought, since I was so well known in the Democratic circle, and even among some Republicans, that with me being on there, people would have some trust and faith in what I had to provide and the oversight that I would provide. So like I said, I came in naive just to make a difference. Really, that was my primary goal.
And then at some point, though, did you become concerned about ES&S at all? Or
actually, at some point I became concerned about everything, and ES&S was just one of them. One of the things that I my primary concern initially with ES&S is it seemed like the functioning of the commission relied solely on ES&S, and it's just hard as a concerned about the taxpayer dollars and what have you, as to why we were utilizing this vendor for basically everything. And I made comments, and it is on record that when are we going to be self-sustained? That was my question to the administrator. When are you going to learn from ES&S so that you don't have to rely on them so much? And it was always, they were learning, excuse me, they were learning, but I never saw where that was happening. And so it just concerned me that they were that involved in everything. And
when you say everything, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say everything, what is everything?
It's like simple things, like they had to come and provide oversight in terms of the process, in terms of looking at our ballots, in terms of the work plan that our staff had made up. It was like they were approving or providing oversight. And then of particular concern on an election, one night, the election eve night, I came in like we always would do, and I couldn't get in the server room, and there is the ES&S representative, which was well known because he was there on a regular basis and a nice guy, but he was the one that was inside the server room with the key, and no one else was in there, and he's the one who had to let me in. And so I was quite concerned about that. And
did anybody else see this? See that he was in there, locked in the room?
They knew he was in there. Yeah, because he had to have the key. He had the key. I mean, how else was he going to get in?
So he was in there all by himself inside that room.
He was in that room all by himself, and he let me.
Which election was this?
Oh, I don't know.
Remember what year was it?
It would have been in 2012, I believe. It would have been in 2012.
And do you remember the guy's name?
No, I want to say Dan, but I really don't know. I can't. That's the thing about aging. Your mind just goes and comes.
I'm terrible with names anyway. Always have been.
He was a nice guy, and he was there. I mean, he interacted with the staff on a regular basis, but this was a concern for me, and so I brought it up at a meeting, and even questioned the IT director of the Shelby County government. And he came, he was at one of our meetings, and he said, no, vendors should not have access to our server. And so
who is that? Who's the IT director of Shelby?
Well, and I don't know if he's still there now. Ew, and I can't even remember his name. Like I said,
that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. I figured if you had it, no problem.
But I want to no, it may come to me. But he came to a meeting, and I brought it up, and he said no, that vendors should not have access to our server. And so that's when they implemented this supposed to be security system. And so that didn't happen anymore after that. But that was a concern for me.
So there was what year was the security system put in?
Well, it started after this 2012 thing when I brought it up and my concern about. So it would have been after that. And then another issue that I had is that, and this would have been 2012 or the beginning of 2013, we had all agreed that we were going to get the new new voting machines. That was on everybody's mind. Everybody wanted new machines. And so we had agreed that we were going to have new machines. Well, somewhere in the process, and I still don't understand where, but the administrator had ES&S come in and do something, I guess a review or whatever of the system, the voter registration system. And out of the clear blue sky, we're sitting in a meeting one night, and here comes this proposal for ES&S for a new voter machine. And it's like, well, how did this happen? We hadn't discussed this. And I was particularly concerned because the commissioner at the time that was very smart young man, very computer literate in the whole. And when he first came on board, he mentioned to them about the voter registration system. And they were adamant that there was nothing wrong with the system. And that was just the year before or whatever. And then out of the clear blue sky, ES&S determines that we need a new voter registration system, and they present a proposal. So of course I'm very upset because we hadn't discussed it. And so why are we getting...
Yeah, I'm sorry. So typically, this is something like all the commissioners should have been involved in decisions.
Of course, yeah.
Someone come to review the voter registry, and they just cut all the Democrats out of it. Do you think, or just you?
As far as I know, everybody was cut out.
Okay, so this is holding.
Other than the chair, the chairperson, I'm very sure knew. The chairperson.
And who was the chair?
At that time, it was Robert Myers. And
okay.
At that time, him and Richard knew stuff that may or may not have been shared with the rest of even the other Republican commissioners. And so I challenged him on that. And Richard said that he didn't, it was unsolicited, that they did this on their own. And I'm saying they're not going to go through all that trouble to send us a proposal on their own. And so, but that's when we switched from the machines to the voter registration system. And then I was very upset, and I let them know that. And then they...
So you actually bought an ES. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting, but I'm not following quite. So what machines did you have before that you switched out for the ES&S system?
It was a voter registration system that we switched out. We didn't switch out the machines.
Okay.
It was new, but that was a long, drawn out process. It took forever for that to happen. In fact, the system, this was in, like, say, 2012, and we were involved with that when Linda Phillips came on in 2016. And I don't think we even got it until either 16 or 2017. So that's how long that process went on before we actually got the voter registration system.
Okay, so you guys didn't actually buy the ES&S one, though. You ended up getting a voter registration system, didn't you, from Knowing or something? Isn't that
from No? Yeah. We ended up from Knowing, and even to do that, they wanted a consultant, which again I was concerned about because I didn't feel that we needed a consultant. That we should. I mean, we might needed a consultant to help us shape what it was that we wanted, if that was necessary. Although I couldn't understand why, but I felt that we should know what we wanted, and if anything, the consultant could help us put it in words, but we needed to know what we needed that would work. Because as a prior consultant myself, I've learned that people, they use the consultant, and when things don't work out right, they want to blame it on the consultant. So the consultants have general knowledge, but a consultant's role is to go in to the institution and see what the institution's needs are from them, because everything doesn't work in every setting. So
this was an ES&S consultant again?
No, it was, I can't remember the lady's name. It was another consultant. It was her and another guy that came in, I guess the Knowing guy. They came in, they were awarded the contract for $200,000 to come in and be the consultant to tell us what we needed in our voter registration system.
Okay, and so this is before you left the commission, I guess.
Oh yeah.
When did you leave the commission?
I left last year.
Just last year.
In 2019, in April or May. Yeah.
So, the guy back to the ES&S guy that was, he was someone that you had seen frequently.
Oh yeah, he was there all the time. Everybody liked him. He's a nice guy. He was there all the time. Yeah.
When like once a week or every day?
I don't know if he was there every week, but he was there frequently enough that the staff felt very comfortable with him. He was there on a regular basis. I mean, I didn't really monitor the number of times that he came, but I know that he was there frequently, that everyone felt very comfortable with him walking around and whatever, because he was there on a regular basis.
And at some point, did somebody get arrested? Was he arrested?
Actually, he got arrested. He was arrested for, which was quite shocking. And the ES&S obviously didn't know anything about that. But he was arrested for DUI, and in the middle of the night, and he had this mug shot, and I can't remember who sent me the mug shot, and I have been really looking, trying to find it and see if I still have it, but my computer crashed, and I think that's when I lost it. But anyway, there was this mug shot of him being arrested in the middle of the night in an area where you question why he was there.
Like
And
what type of area?
well, it's one of the poorer areas, and where a lot of drug activity and stuff that goes on. So we were just questioning. It was predominantly a black area, and we were just wondering why would he be in that area of town that time of night, because it was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. I'm not really sure,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't know. When someone sent me the mugshot in a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the rep, I guess the supervising rep from ES&S attended that meeting, and then that's when I brought it up. I had the mugshot and I showed it to everybody that was there, and I shared my concern that we would be so freely with someone who had been arrested. And of course, the supervisor didn't know anything about it.
Do you know who the
So,
supervisor was?
God, I can't remember. I'll have to look through all
It's
my
okay.
files and
If you can
stuff
look it up
because,
later.
yeah, because I really don't know those people's names.
Do you know if the guy that got the DUI, does he still work for ES&S as far as you
Well,
know?
I thought that he had been let go because the supervisor was very concerned when I produced that mugshot. He immediately got up and left out of the building, and I assumed to make a telephone call. And so after that, we never did see the guy. He never came back. I keep wanting to say the name Dan keeps coming to my mind, but I don't know if that's correct. But anyway, the guy never came back to our facility again, and I thought he was terminated, but someone told me that he's still working, so I don't know.
Do you know, was he a contractor for ES&S as far as you know, or was he an actual employee
I
or
believe he was an actual employee of ES&S. Yeah, I think he was actually. In
okay.
fact, most of the people that they sent were, if I'm not mistaken, were actually employees with it. I mean, they'd send some other people from time to time, but this guy was the regular for us.
What would they send other people to do? Do you know?
Well, one of the things, when we had major issues, and with this here same situation that you talked about with the boats coming up missing and whatever, when that was brought to my attention, I brought it to the chairperson's attention at the meeting, and he said, well, had you done an investigation? And I says, no, I had not, because I'm just finding out this and I'm bringing it to you all now. And
Mm-hmm.
so from there, we did the investigation. And so it was a guy, one of the ES&S people came in the process of the investigation when I was talking to Richard and the assistant administrator and the machine tech guy. And this
Mm-hmm.
guy just happened to be there. And I asked him a question as to what was going on. And he said that for some reason, one of the machines didn't, even though it was entered, they entered the information, and it didn't take it. It didn't take it in the system. So,
That
I
was their
don't,
explanation.
that was the explanation. Yeah. Yeah.
So there actually was there a report written up by the commission of
There
that
was a report.
investigation?
I wrote a report, my findings, and sent it to the commissioners, the Democrat and the Republican commissioners, as a result of my findings. And I didn't do 100%, but I did go back based on the information that I received about those conflicting numbers, and just kind of did my own research, random, and I discovered that there was quite a few discrepancies in the numbers of the votes, and but it was, and I made mention of that. it wasn't, although there was a lot of discrepancies, and they range from a small amount to up to 300, difference in numbers, but it wasn't enough to offset the outcome of that election.
Right.
And so I made that clear that it wasn't enough to affect the outcome, but it was a concern that we were having that.
Did you guys ever look at poll tapes again, as far as you know, after that election?
Well, I don't think the commissioners didn't look at them. I always just I would check the statement of vote cast against the information that the auditors would provide us when they did their reports. And I always would check I always kept the last report that we got off of the server on election night, which showed the total votes that came in. I always kept a copy, and I would check that against the auditor's report and the statement of votes cast.
And then, go ahead, sorry. So after that election, things matched up, and the same woman who had lost previously, or in the 2015, 2016, who brought the lawsuit, Wanda
Albert, yeah.
She ended up proceeding to win in the next election. Is that right?
Well, well, surprisingly, this is what was so strange, that every position that the Republicans won in that year, that following the election period, every one they lost. The Democrats took them all.
Democrats swept. And so this was after that. There were calls for a criminal investigation of Holden, right?
This was after Richard Holden, the very first major county election after Richard Holden left. The Democrats won them all. In fact, they even won one that they didn't even expect to win. That was a real shocker. And they won them all, every one.
So I want to talk a little bit about, so Benny Smith, Commissioner Smith, made this discovery based on the poll tapes, and then Bloomberg came out. And when in this process, were there calls for a criminal investigation? And if so, who was demanding one, if you know?
No, there wasn't to my knowledge. Wanda Halbert had filed her own lawsuit. And like I said before, all of them being all the candidates filed a lawsuit. And I think that was the first time I heard of Bev Johnson. What's her name? Bev.
I can't remember.
The Bev.
That's okay.
Okay, but yeah.
Oh, Bev Harris.
Bev Harris.
Yeah, black box voting. Sure.
Right. She came down and was very involved in the lawsuit that the candidates had, but the judge at the time would not even recognize her as an expert.
As an expert, I heard about that.
Yeah.
And that was the attorney, right, Robert?
No, that was the judge. That was Robert Goldman. That was, I think it's
okay.
Goldman. I think.
But it was my understanding that Richard Holden's retirement was pretty abrupt somewhere after Commissioner Smith made this discovery that he just suddenly retired. Is that not?
Well, it was abrupt. It was abrupt. I guess maybe under the pressure, because there was a lot of pressure that was coming out about stuff. So, but yeah, it was an abrupt retirement.
So he hadn't talked about it previously?
Oh, no, there had not been any discussion. No, there had not been any discussion. He just announced at in a meeting that he had decided that he was going to retire.
Was this after the Bloomberg article, if you remember, or was it just after Benny?
It was in 2015, the latter part of 2015 is when he announced it, or latter part of 2015 or the beginning of 2016, because that Linda Phillips came on after that.
Was your investigation able to reach a conclusion as to whether, that votes disappearing from 20 or so predominantly African-American precincts, whether that was nefarious or benign?
No, I could not. I could not come to any conclusion whether it was a human error or if it was intentional or it was a concern that we had. And it was always a concern with me, not only for that, it's just, and I mentioned that before, it's like whenever there was issues, regardless of votes missing or machines not working or sites not opening, or it always seemed to happen in the Black neighborhood. It always seemed to happen. Ballots flipping. The predominantly, and I know, when you say that, we have to realize that the majority of the polls are in the Black neighborhood. So definitely you would expect more, but you would not expect all the time. It just like it
Right,
was all the time. It
exclusively.
was an issue, yeah, in the Black neighborhoods. And so and there was accusations of having, the better machines in the white neighborhoods and whatever. And I questioned that, and they swore that that was not the truth, that, they did not pick certain machines for certain neighborhoods. And obviously I did not, I could not prove or disprove that at all, period. But
Was there ever an attempt to get an independent forensic analysis of the voting equipment after the 2015 fiasco?
no, there wasn't. And that's what my concern is. I do feel we did have an audit about and it wasn't necessarily about the machines, it was about the operations of and the issues that constantly surface. In fact, even the Secretary of State had a controller come down here and do an investigation and audit into Shelby County. After that, they had a real snafu, and I can't even remember what that, but it was a disaster. I mean, that was a disaster.
That was I think it was with electronic poll books. Is that right? Where they put the wrong database in?
Put the wrong database and the whole.
And it was for early voting, which is when most of the African American community, more so than Caucasian, tended to vote. Yeah, I heard about that. But
so
that was
he had someone come down and they, and do an investigation. And then, I was concerned about some other operations, and the county commission, the Shelby County government came and did an internal audit, but it wasn't per se of machines. It was just in operations. And
right.
so
Because there
and
were
both
other
of them
things wrong, right?
yeah, there was just a lot of management issues. It was just a disaster. It just was a disaster. I think, they just, I don't know. I think they were just over their head. I think Richard was over his head in trying to be an administrator of elections.
As far as that 2015, 2016 election, so you had to pretty much rely on ES&S's word for it as to what happened?
Yeah, and they, we kept challenging them on send us a statement and whatever, and they kind of danced around and finally submitted something, and I've got to see if I can find that as well. But we were basically at the mercy of ES&S. We were at the mercy of ES&S the entire time that I was there. They were the go-to. They're the ones who provided everything. And they were the ones who Richard Holden, he relied on ES&S. He relied on them heavily for basically everything.
Did he still allow them into the central tabulation room?
No, that never happened again. After
Okay.
that never happened. To my knowledge, that never happened again. After that, because
Had you ever heard? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
had you ever heard
was
that there were mirror servers or backup servers for the election system? Had you ever heard?
Yeah, I did, and but no one could ever prove it. No one knew where they were. No one knew anything. There was a concern that there was two laptops that kind of, well, one of them did reappear, the one that Richard had, but one that there was the prior manager had one, and when the county did the audit, that one never showed up. So, but we were never exposed to anything. That was the only thing that we knew outside of internally. So we never had any proof of any other machines or anything of that nature.
So was that other laptop was one that was used by Richard Holden, you think?
Well, the one for Richard was recovered, but the one from that supervisor, we don't know what happened with that one.
Oh, so I'm sorry, who is this? The ES&S supervisor? You mean?
No, this was the election commission. She was finally not reappointed, but her name was Kim Perkins. She was the one of the managers at the time when Richard was there.
And she was a Republican too?
Yeah, oh yeah, she was a Republican too.
And she had her own laptop that somehow interfaced.
She had her
with the
own
election system?
laptop. In fact, not only did she have her own laptop, the George Munger, who was the other commissioner at the time, he discovered she had her own Wi-Fi address, and that was a violation of the county system. And of course, when George brought that to the attention of Richard and everyone, that they got rid of that one. Yeah.
So, but this was a computer that you think interfaced somehow with the election system?
Well, we don't know. I mean, it was a laptop, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
How often did the commission meet? Did you go, was it like a regular thing?
Yeah,
Where you go every day?
The commission met typically once a month. And at one time they were meeting once a month, and then they would meet for subcommittee meetings, but they became of no substance and we stopped doing that. But the commission would meet once a month.
So the ES&S guy that was there frequently, he was there frequently even during just those once a month things where you were meeting, just doing the thing. And
yeah, well, now that guy, he didn't necessarily come, to our meetings. I mean, he may come to them. His supervisor would come to some of our meetings. Whenever he was there doing something else with either the supervisor, who he had established a relationship with, the same Kim, or doing some project that Richard had him on. But he didn't really come to our meetings. His supervisor would come to our meetings if he was in town.
So was this something though? I mean, did you have like an office that you went to regularly, but the meetings were only once a month?
Well, meetings, it was at the operations center. I mean, it was at the operations center.
I'm just trying to figure out how when it was that you saw him, if it wasn't at the meetings. Like, was it a 9?
Oh no, I never saw him.
I know it was a 9 to 5 job, but
yeah, I never saw him outside of the meeting. The only time I saw him outside the meeting is maybe, actually, I've never really saw him outside of the election commission. I saw him after hours doing an election when I saw him in the server room. Okay. But
that's right.
Yeah. I never.
So you saw him with frequency during the meetings, like you'd be at him.
Yeah, just like I said, he would just be at the election commission. He would not be in our meetings per se. He would be there, out there doing some other project, working with the supervisor or some project that Richard had assigned him to, but he wouldn't necessarily be at our meetings. His boss would come to our meetings from time to time to maybe address something that we might have had an issue with that ES&S may have had some knowledge, but this guy didn't come to the meetings.
Okay. Did you have any other concerns with ES&S and that we haven't covered yet that you can think of?
No, that was primarily my concern with ES&S. Is I was really concerned ethically, but then I had to, ES&S, I understand, is a vendor, and my concern is with the administration. Why, whatever happened with ES&S, it was with this vendor, with the administration, and why did an administration allow this to happen? But other than that, I had no really, dealings per se with ES&S. I voiced my concerns, and my concerns that I felt they were too heavily involved, and that the administrator should have been more independent and less reliant on ES&S. Yeah.
So And then have you heard from Commissioner Smith more recently that they have an RFP sent
Yeah.
one out recently, and it references a third
Yeah, I tell
server
you,
at a remote location?
I've heard, well, I've seen the things that he's said, and because he's been very vocal, and there's never been anyone that has his background that has been on the commission, and so things that he is surfacing, I mean, it could have just went right over our heads,
Right,
over everybody's head, and nobody would have knew. I mean, even the Republican
right,
commissioners wouldn't have known what they were talking about. So we were at the mercy of the administrators, and with Richard Holden, he didn't know either. So that's one of the reasons why he relied so heavily on ES&S. Linda Phillips has a little bit more knowledge than Richard Hold'em, so she doesn't rely as heavily on ES&S as Richard did. But they could have came in there and told the commissioners anything. We would not have known. But Richard knew, and even well, George Munger, he didn't have the in-depth knowledge that Benny, but he had more than anyone else prior to Benny. But he only served a 1-2 year term, so. And that's a concern with all of these election commissioners that I'm finding, is that they're basically at the mercy. It's not something that you can just put someone on. I mean, you gotta, if we're talking about the integrity of the election process, somebody needs to know something about the process, and they're
right.
appointing people and putting them on these boards, and they don't know. They're just at the mercy of whatever somebody tells them, and so that's a that all of our elected bodies need to be concerned about, and they can't leave these people hanging. I mean, if they're voicing some concerns, you need to step up on the plate. I mean, there was a concern that I had because they would always say we want to be transparent and this and that and the other, but the transparency was very selective at best. And it
Hmm.
gets to the point now where I mean, it was always trying to get documents. You could not get them. You had to kept almost like begging for them.
Who would you
And
be asking? I'm sorry to
you would,
interrupt. Sorry to keep interrupting.
oh, that's
Who would you ask
okay.
for? Who wasn't?
You would ask Richard, and eventually you'd have to say, are you saying you're not going to provide me with this information after asking so many times? And then he would eventually. Now, one thing that I can say about him, he would, when you cornered him, he would provide you something. Now, whether it was accurate or whatever, but he would provide you something. But now it's like, and I guess I'm really disappointed because I expected more out of Linda, but it's like you can't get anything. I mean, even in my role as primary board, there is stuff that I'm entitled to, and I've even had to do an open records request to get information, and I
Oh my
still
God,
didn't get everything that
that's
I
nuts.
asked for. And so that, and I didn't have that suspicion with Linda, but now I'm becoming more suspension. And I just think that somebody needs to do an investigation into what's happening, why they're so reluctant to release information, because that makes you suspicious when you've got
Yeah.
open rest and it's a law that it's a public entity and you're entitled. Why is there a battle to get information? And I'm hearing this from other sources beyond myself. And in my role in the primary board, there is information that I need in order for us to function, and I still can't get it. And the thing that concerns me is that with Robert Myers, when I would write a concern about getting information, he would eventually respond with some patronizing comment or whatever, but would say something. But with the current chair, and he's copied on everything, and I don't see nothing, and you don't hear anything. And I mean, I've even copied the state election commission, Mark Goins, Trey Haggard, all the administrators, about my concern with the lack of getting information, and it's still you can't get it. And I'm just not going to keep asking them for that. If I have to go to court to get my information, I'm willing to do this, because we've never had it has never been as bad as it is now. You can't get the information, and it's just kind of hard to understand why.
That
And
is it's really infuriating.
it is infuriating.
What specifically have they not provided? What type of information?
Well, just my routine stuff that I need in terms of the assignments. It's crucial. The statute requires us to make sure there is a balance of the workers, Democrats, Republicans, and the different inspectors and whatever, that is equally balanced. And so they have to give us that report, that the sheet, to show us the assignments. I have been asking since since March, to get the assignment for the March president, and I still have not gotten it yet. And just to get the list of poll workers, I still have not gotten that yet. It's just, like I said, it's impossible to get information. And I guess I'm more furious now because with this here NDA thing that they had Benny sign, that just compound my concern about why is it stuff is secret, because never in the history of any place have I known a commissioner to have to sign an NDA for information. It's always been my position that the commissioners had access to everything. So it's concerning to me that he was made to do this, and who
Can
made
you
the
explain?
decision.
Yeah, can you explain just to people watching what an NDA is and what it was for?
It's a non-disclosure agreement, and it's like he should not have had to sign that. He should have automatically been able to receive it because he was a commissioner.
And this was I'm sorry, to receive what? To receive
he wanted to see information on I think the RFP that was submitted. The RFP is the request for proposal for the new voting machines. And I think that's one of the things that he wanted.
And they wouldn't even let him see the RFP.
And they wouldn't even let him see it. And I mean, he's a commissioner. I mean, the commissioners are the governing body. They're over the administrator. And for them to singly make this decision that he had to sign, it's just never been heard of. It's just never been heard of. And that was very disturbing to me, that they made him to do that, because it sent a signal that the Democratic commissioners are not equal. They're not privy to information, and which has been a concern of mine from day one. And I felt that Trey Haggard, the Secretary of State, need to identify exactly what is the role of the Democratic commissioner if you're telling them that they cannot have certain information. But more alarming to me, the fact after they made him sign this, when he got the information, it wasn't in its entirety. They picked and choose what they wanted him to have. So that for me caused a greater degree of concern, because you make him sign something and then you don't even give him all the information. You pick out, what you want him to have, when all he had to do was ask the county for it, and the county gave him the complete document. So that's a real issue for me. That's a
red flag.
And that's why I feel like there's got to be, to go to that length to hide information. It makes me wonder what else is being hidden. And that's why I'm going to be trying to get somebody to look closely and do an internal investigation as to what is going on in this election commission, that they are so reluctant to open up information that the public is entitled to. And when they give you the information, they don't give it to you in its entirety. They pick and choose what you can have. And it's my understanding that the only information that's confidential is Social Security, Social Security numbers, and, maybe address or something like that. But the other information is supposed to be open, and that election commission is a service entity. It doesn't have any real authority. So I'm just concerned as to why it is you can't get information. And not only for myself, I've heard other people are saying the same thing, that they can't. One lady says she's been requesting information from Linda since February, or even beyond, and she has not been able to get it. And this just should not be. So it makes me concerned.
So I know I've had you on here a long time. Do you have just a few more minutes? I wanted to ask you briefly about the poll books if you have time.
Okay, I'm sure. Now, let me make sure that I am not the computer person. There is a lot
Oh, no,
that
I'm
I
not going to ask
probably
you
don't
anything
know.
technical.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Just so when Linda Phillips became the administrator after Richard Holden left, she told the county that they had to get new poll books from No Inc., right? Or originally it was from a company called Everyone Counts, where she had previously worked, and then it
Well, at
became
the time, we didn't know. I mean, we didn't know where she worked. See, where the thing is, when at
right,
that level, you don't look at applications, you look at a
right.
resume. And so that's what we saw was a resume. The application base basically was for processing into the county system. So that may have went to the secretary who forwarded to county personnel, but that never came before the commissioners. We never saw it.
So she
So
didn't put that she worked at Everyone Counts on her resume. It was
no,
only
no,
application.
no,
That was her
no.
immediately preceding position, wasn't it? I thought that was
Yeah, but it didn't. It said that's from
wow.
some company, international company or whatever, but it didn't say who it was. And
And then
so,
one day, did she just come in and say, we need to get a new voter registration system and poll books, and they have to.
well, no, the voter registration system didn't start with her. That started with Richard, and she just came in on the tail end and saw it through. But because she was too new when she came on board, it was already in process before she
But
came
that
on
was her
board.
company, right? Wasn't that
Yeah,
her?
but
It
well,
was actually bought from her
it
company.
was in process. It just hadn't gotten to who was going to be awarded the contract. When he left, it hadn't gotten to that part. So she took it from there and went on with the knowing or whatever, but it hadn't gotten to that part with Richard. So
So she directed it to her former employer,
she
and
did.
her son still worked there at the time.
Well, and
And
we didn't know that. We didn't know
and she
anything
didn't
about her
mention
son.
it to you
She
guys, to the
never
election commission.
she never said a word. And I would have I don't remember a lot of things, but some things I would have remembered. And no, we had, I mean, we were very impressed with her background and um with her personality. I mean, and I guess people always put their best foot forward when they're coming on a new job.
Right, right.
But we were just so pleased I mean, she was just such a breath of fresh air
Compared
for
to Richard
previously.
Holden,
Yeah. And so we just didn't question her. We were glad she had the background in elections and whatever. And so we were pleased, but no, we had no knowledge that she worked for this company.
and so she's the one who. I'm sorry, she's the one who proposed them, though, and everyone took a vote.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't even know if it came. We just, we were just so confident in her
Right.
that I don't even remember if it coming up to a vote. We had already decided that well, they decided that we were going to do. I was never on board
Right.
with the new voter registration decision, but it was already decided that we were going to we were going to get the new voter registration system, and because they were convincing me that we needed to do this before we got the new machines and blah blah blah, but whatever. But so the decision to get the machines, the new voter registration system, Linda Phillips, that decision was made before Linda Phillips came on board.
Okay.
But
But she chose the vendor.
she chose the vendor.
And then
Yeah.
at some point, did she say that you guys needed to get new e-poll books and you couldn't use the ones you already had because they wouldn't be compatible with the
Yeah,
new voter registration system?
yeah, and that came later. I guess the year later or something like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that did come later and we got those. And so now, what was ironic about this new voter registration system, after we paid all that money for the system, it never worked. It
Oh,
never
crap.
worked. And it wasn't working when I left there, and I don't know if it's working now, but it did not work. And I was
In
very
what way?
concerned. It didn't work. It caused all kind of problems. It wasn't compatible. It didn't match. It kept throwing people out. We had a situation where over 2,000 provisional ballots had to be people had to do, and it wasn't necessary. It was because of the system, and they tried to blame it on our old equipment. And when I asked, they said it was 200. Well, come to find out, it was 2,000, and it wasn't because of the old system, because the old system had been working for us as far as provisional ballots, and it was because that system wasn't working. And again, I still don't know if it's working, but I know when I left there, that system was not working, and
And
it's questionable if it's work. After we spent all that money, it wasn't
Jesus.
working. It
And
wasn't
then
working.
what about the electronic poll books? Did those work? So right now, No Ink has the voter registration system. It was originally everyone counts, then it went to Votem, and then No Ink took the contract, or they just bought the contract.
Yeah.
And No Ink also has the new electronic poll books, or the most new. Did you guys use those, and did they work?
Well, to my knowledge, I didn't hear any complaints about the poll books. The concern is now that they're talking about this new whatever voter registration system. I mean, machines, and that's something that I want the county commissioners to be aware of. Whatever they get, whatever the RFP is, whatever, somebody need to question why they would have to buy additional poll books to be compatible with these machines, because you
Because yeah,
just
they just
can't.
bought the No Ink
We
ones.
just exactly that
And what's
exactly
so weird is though is they kept the ES&S poll books. They didn't get rid of them. So they stuck
right,
with No Ink.
right.
Did they use both of them? Do you
Yeah,
think
yeah.
they used
I don't know.
both? You don't
I don't
know.
know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
But
really
it's,
odd.
it's really odd, and that's something that someone should be questioning, because if we just spent that kind of money for new poll books, and now you're talking about God only knows how much for new machines, then the question is, whoever does that RFP, they need to make it clear that these are the and what your machine has to be compatible. That should be number one priority on any RFP, because you cannot keep taking taxpayers' money and throwing it away like that. There need to be some
I
accountability.
agree. I agree.
And so,
Yeah, it's really weird because the RFP says that they're going to get more poll books, right? The RFP
yeah,
for the voting machine says they're going to need more poll books. And what's so weird about this setup, this just seems to be a new thing. Like, not only are these new touchscreen ballot marking devices kind of a new thing, but they're activating them with the poll books. So
yeah,
they have to be compatible now.
yeah, yeah. They
Even though poll
definitely
books are
need to.
technically voter registration system, or used to be, not part of the voting system. Now they're also part of the voting system. They're using them together, and that's got me
Yeah,
that seems
I,
kind of, it hasn't
it's
really been studied. It seems
I
really
know, I know, I
dangerous.
know. And the thing is, the fact that who, as like I said, totally illiterate when it comes to anything technical, but for me to pick up on something, that should send a red flag that
Well,
there's a
you've got
problem.
common sense,
Yeah,
and these
yeah,
things connect to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth,
yeah,
or some other network, and then they're programming a card that you then stick into the voting machine. It just seems really I'm
yeah.
trusting this new setup so much, or why so many election officials are trusting it.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It just makes you wonder. I just think that there needs to be more oversight. Um, and we just, and it's hard because like I said, there's just not a lot of people who have the in-depth knowledge to be able to challenge or even ask the right questions. I mean, you just don't even know what questions, because you don't have
Yeah.
that technical expertise that knows what all goes on in the process.
And then they keep
And I mean,
adding
we've
layers
had
and layers. Yeah.
layers and layers, and we've had the Department of Justice has had so many complaints about the Shelby County Election Commission. I mean, and it's been ongoing. I mean, and even when the Democrats were in control, there was problems, but the problems magnified after Republicans taking control. But the Department of Justice has had so many complaints, and they've come down, and they, in fact, one time they reached out to me to let me know they were coming and blah blah blah. But they don't understand the chances of being able to catch something out in the polls are very slim. I mean, what are you going to catch out there? I mean, whatever happens is usually is behind the scene internally or whatever. You may find the voter intimidation, or you may find
Right.
that kind of stuff, delays and all this here, and making people fill out provisional ballots that maybe didn't need to. That stuff is very obvious, and you may see that. But if you're talking about manipulation in terms of the internal voting, the votes and all that kind of stuff, chances are they're not going to catch that outside. That's an internal thing
And they
I
didn't want to look at the machines.
well,
They
I don't think
go
that
to the
they knew.
polls.
I don't know if they even knew how to, because basically they just made rounds and they would,
This
they
is
write whatever they found, but basically what they found was something that was insignificant, really.
this was the FBI.
The Department of Justice.
Didn't the FBI at one point come out? This will be the last part. They came out and interviewed people about Richard Holden. Isn't that right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was FBI or Department of Justice. I know that
Okay.
one of those one of those agencies did, but I don't
Okay.
know
And then
which one.
nothing.
My knowledge has been with the Department of Justice, so so I don't
Okay.
know.
Well, so, huh. Are you ever afraid to talk about these issues? Are you
Oh
worried for
no,
both of
no,
you?
oh no, no, no,
No?
no. There's one thing. There is no muzzle. When you get as old as I am, and you feel like you paid your dues, and you feel like you're independent, not wealthy, but you're okay, that nobody can control you, there's no muzzle on your mouth. You feel
Well,
free to
that's
say
good.
whatever, and I don't mind. I'll shout it from the rooftop. I have some concerns, and with this NDA thing, it's just it heightened my concerns, and I feel like there need to be an investigation to find out what is going on, why they're so reluctant to release basic information that is part of public record. And there's
Who,
always an excuse about we're short or we whatever, and that's not going to fly, because they hire temporary employees as often and as freely as they want to, and the commissioner is obligated and has stated that they would pay. So that is just not going to fly with me. It's just not going to fly.
who do you recommend asking for to conduct an investigation?
Well, it needs to be someone who has some knowledge of how the process, obviously, because just having somebody. I mean, I could go in and do a systems review, but that was not necessarily get to where what's going on. It needs somebody who has some knowledge of the process and know what to look for, know what forms, know what should be available, know what is taking place and may not be taking place. And so I think there needs to be a forensic, a very thorough, from head to toe. And again, when you make people suspicious of you, then they're suspicious about the whole operation. Because otherwise, for something like this, I just don't understand what is the hesitancy
I
in
don't either.
supplying the information. So that makes me want someone to look deeper into what's going on.
Okay, well, I hope this will help and we'll get somebody to look at it deeper. Thank you so much. I know this was a long interview, but I really appreciate it, and I hope
No problem. If it gets some
attention.
results, yeah. If it gets some results, I understand that there's been something sent up for congressional to come and review, not only Shelby County, with some other
There
counties.
has.
And
I
that
hadn't
there,
heard this.
well, I think there was a letter that was written to some House people up in the House. Yeah, for them to look at several, not only Shelby County, but several other counties where there some
Okay.
concerns regarding ES&S. And I just think, there is this big thing about criminal reform and all of this, but the basic of any reform is going to be in the electoral process. So is being able to vote people in and vote people out. And if there's a problem in your voting process, there's not going to be any reform. There's not going to be,
I
because
agree.
it
It's the
all
basis
starts
of
at the ballot box.
everything.
Yeah, that's the basis of everything.
Have you heard? Do you know if if the House has responded to that letter? Because that's
I
what
have
I
not.
haven't heard.
Yeah, no, I
I knew
have
they
not
sent
heard.
one.
Yeah, I have not heard.
I
I think, there was so much going on. It's just been so much going on now. Even with
Yeah.
us in the county, they have not even. There's been a lot of information that's been sent up to them regarding the hand mark, regarding ES&S and whatever. But they've been so locked down into budget that they have not had a chance to really look or concentrate on any. And they've been had long marathon budget meetings and whatever, and they've got to get
Right.
that budget done by the end of June. So they haven't even had a
Okay.
chance to look at anything. So, but
So you're
and
hopeful maybe that,
I'm sorry, pardon.
are you hopeful maybe that when that's done, they
Well, I'm
might, or?
hoping that somebody will take the time and at least ask some questions. And, you can't just take the word. And that's the problem. We've been at the mercy of taking the word and not following through to get a different perspective or to gather more information. And
I
that's what
agree.
my challenge to them is to look at the information. And if you don't like it, or if you still have questions, and get somebody on the other side. There's always two sides. That's where you have a defense and a prosecution. You've got two sides. So gather as much information. Just don't take anything face value from what no one person say, because you have a duty to the taxpayer. This is taxpayers' dollars, and you have a duty to make sure that the money is well spent, and you need to make sure that there is nothing that's nefarious or anything that's going on with the system. We have an obligation to maintain the integrity of the electoral process, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican. And that was my initial concern. That still is my concern, because I think we have a duty to protect the unspoken who don't know.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree so much. Thank you. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Well,
And
thank you. Thank you so
I'd love
much
to
for
talk to
asking.
you again. Of course.
Okay,
Hopefully we'll get some
anytime.
progress on this. All
All
right. Have a
righty.
good
Thank you.
afternoon. Thanks,
You
Norma.
too.
Bye.
Bye bye.